Hey everybody, I'm Vincent Van Ho, community lead here at Dark Times, and this is Miles. Miles, what are we talking about today?
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me back. Today we're going to be taking a look at level design in Dark Times, take a look at the philosophy behind the maps and how we come up with the ideas, highlight some of the technical things, and then discuss how we iterate through enhancing gameplay mechanics and story.
What is the core philosophy behind the map and the level design of Dark Times?
We like to work pretty thematically with the way that we build content for the games that we develop. A lot of the time, we'll take a look at the philosophy we've set in place for the direction of the entire experience and then see how we could branch off from that to do something in the similar vein for the level design. And one of the big core pillars for us is that brutality, it's that cunning. And you can't really have one without the other because then you don't really get the feeling of it, right? If we just imagine, I've mentioned this in previous episodes too, that if you have, let's say, a gladiator in an arena, if it was just all brutal, then you wouldn't get the MacGyver feel of like a gladiator experience, right? Because a lot of the time you'll see them fumble, they might lose a shield, so have to look around and scrounge for something else. So that's not just brutal, it's also cunning because they're also thinking about things. And so we wanted to make sure that those pillars were able to shine through level design as well. And the way we do this in very simple terms is trying to evoke those emotions through just playing the level we've designed, essentially. So you should feel cunning just playing the game. You should feel brutal just playing the game. And so how do we then go ahead and create these encounters? And we look at things really from the emergent lens. Emergence is a big topic in game design, but it just means that a game is built in, let's just say, parts. There's running, there's jumping, and we leave it up to the player and level design to encourage a way of combining those two things together. So in Mario, when you first play Super Mario Brothers, you'll come, like literally in the first screen, you'll come across a gap, and a lot of players will just walk first because they only learn to move left and right. So they might walk off the ledge and realize, okay, I probably need to jump. So then they'll walk up to the ledge, jump forward, but they haven't taken a run up. So they'll still won't make it. They'll get further, but they won't make the gap. You actually have to run and jump at the end to clear it, because that will then form the long jump. Long jump is an emergent mechanic or emergent dynamic that happens as a result of combining two mechanics together, right? So we use that idea of emergence because a lot of these games that we've used as reference, Breath of the Wild, Gang Beasts, they lean into this as well. I mentioned multiple times that in Breath of the Wild, you can fire an arrow that's on fire. If that hits something that is made of flammable material like grass or something like that, it can catch. That concept is emergence, the catching of fire onto this thing. That's just happening because the systems work in a specific way, and this specific material is combustible, right? Or it is affected by fire. And so when these two things come into contact, it creates this thing that you didn't really know was going to happen. You had an idea based on reality and what could happen, but you try it in the game and it actually works, right? So this is this emergent gameplay where every time you play, you're gonna have a different story to tell. And that's really the philosophy behind every map. You could replay this many times, and because you can combine all of the things, the execution points, the weapons, the elements like fire and ice, you can combine all of these things together to create something that's different every time. And that's really the core philosophy behind the level design itself at a high level.
It sounds like there's a lot of elements there. What challenges did you guys face when balancing realism with gameplay functionality?
Yeah, perfect question to kind of stem from that, right? Because now we have a philosophy. We want to make emergent gameplay. We have the core pillars that dictate the way we could possibly implement that, right? So brutal things like execution points, cunning things like being able to use knockback to knock someone into something to cause something else to happen. We start to have these like pieces now. And then we start to think to ourselves, okay, well, how realistic is this, right? Knocking someone into something else like pinball, is that realistic? And when we come back to feeling the glory, right? That's the third core pillar that we tend to kind of forget. We like brutal and cunning, this game's cool, but then, we have to remember the glory that you feel. And we don't want to ever sacrifice the feeling, that satisfying feeling or that feeling of glory, just for the sake of realism. It is still a game at the end of the day, and it should still be fun. And for us, we're trying to make sure we pick the things. We're looking at all different types of media. I've referenced things like Conan and stuff, right? Because I think there's a level of realism that's accepted in a form of media like screen, right? There is a certain realism that displays in terms of aesthetic, but it's also fun, right? Because it's over dramatized because it's a movie. So I think we can look to things that have tried to look at media and examples like this because it blends the two together in a specific way, and we draw inspiration from that stuff. We always lean on gameplay and creating fun and leaning into our pillars over anything else. If something falls in line with the pillars, it's brutal, it's cunning, and you feel the glory when you're using it, but it's not necessarily super realistic, we're still going to put it in the game.
That sounds like a lot of media, a lot of layers, a lot of media. But give us just a little bit of a sneak peek. Can you kind of like walk us through the process of designing a map like the village or like the ice wall?
Yeah, so it first starts with, so now that we have all of that stuff, we can now start with basically a concept. And the concept will generally have a theme that we want to hook into. Maybe we want to explore the themes of cunning, right? And when I say explore the themes, the different angles you could take to tell a story about a specific thing, right? As an example, I've done a lot of writing stuff before, like screenwriting, traditional screenwriting. And one technique a lot of writers and storytellers will use for juxtaposition is having a scenario occur in parallel or happen in parallel that is highlighting a different way you could approach something. For example, if you're doing a movie about a relationship and the moral argument here is it's always better to tell the truth than lie, then we could have the main leads, the man and the woman, always lying to each other, and that playing out in a really bad way. And then we have the next door neighbors that are always honest with each other, and that plays out a different way. And we can see the different angles on this, the different takes on this theme from the different perspectives in order to strengthen the one we're putting forward, which is telling the truth is always a better way to go, right? And so, and we also highlight the weakness of the leads. They're not able to be honest with each other, right? And now we have a story to tell. And it's the same thing here. If we can understand the themes here and that brutality and that cunning, how could we do different takes on it with the concept? Maybe we want to focus on the cunning elements for this particular map. Like the ice wall it plays with ice, you can melt it. If someone's already in the water and you freeze it while they're there, it'll freeze them in place. So there's a lot of thinking that you can use. And this is like the map you probably replay the most, or it's one of those maps you replay a lot because there is a lot of ways that you can think about, overcoming a specific encounter or utilizing specific tools in the level. And so once we have that theme, okay, I really want to focus on the cunning and make people feel smart and have a lot of emergence in this map. Then we start to think about the encounters that we want to have in order to influence the players to do those things, right? Because a lot of the time, it's when you do an action, there will be a certain emotion associated with it, right? We can give you the tools, but we can't force you to do the action. So you're not going to feel anything until you do the action. So our job as game designers is to put all these little things in the game, and the easy one that everyone will know is that the exploding barrels are red, okay? Because they're red, you want to shoot them, it's hazardous, right? So that's why it's red. Or the light on top of the door. You'll see 5 doors, one has a light on top of it. That's definitely the one we want you to go through. And so designers will use tricks like this to encourage players to do the thing we want you to do with our mechanics, because we want you to feel a certain emotion that we've already established at a kind of high level, right? The encounters we put in are going to try and get this cunning out of you. So we will put things next to each other that can be combined together in a cool way and use tricks to kind of let you see them in a way when you first look at it, almost like a puzzle, where you see 3 things like MacGyver and think to yourself, if I do this, this, and this, arrow in through the fire into that barrel of hay, I think that might set it on fire and kill those guys over there, right? And then you go and execute. So the encounters we design now have this idea of combining together to create something of like that feels glory, right? Where you feel the glory. And so we start to build off these encounters. How many of these do we want? It all stems from the execution points. We'll probably use those as the key encounters. Could be 3, 4, maybe 5. And then we have supporting encounters around it that you could then potentially combo off with these execution points. Maybe a barrel that you can push down a hill that hits a guy and knocks him into an execution point, right? And so once we have those encounters, we need to balance it and make sure we want the player to do this. Are they actually doing this? A lot of play testing and seeing where we've gone wrong. And then we start to hone in on those things. Or they're not pushing the barrel down the cliff. Or maybe we need to put some things on the cliff, like maybe like skid marks, right? Or like the grass is indented, like lines, so that when players see it, they maybe I can push it down, right? We'd use more tricks to kind of encourage pushing things down. And so once that's balanced, then we know, okay, all the elements are here, not changing anything. Let's go and put the art on it now. And so we will then go through and layer in the first levels of art. We might have placeholders a little bit earlier on, but this is where we will start to touch them up, add in the VFX and all the bells and whistles.
Speaking of bells and whistles and balancing, How do maps evolve from initial sketches to the finished playable environments that they are today?
So that process that we talked about is like one cycle. You have all that in, and yeah, we do a bunch of balancing, make sure the gameplay feels good at like without the art, so that we don't have to change it. But of course, it's game dev, and things always still change. And so once you get art in there and sound, what ends up happening is players it now takes on a different meaning, right? Because you had this thing that moved a certain way and it worked and it felt good. The speed of it was good, right? The damage that it dealt was pretty cool. Like that worked. Everything feels good, right? But it's just this cube that's flying through the air. Now we skin it to be an arrow, and now it's like, oh, okay, that's a whole new meaning, right? With the art now, is it easy to see the arrow? Now it's thinner than a cube, right? So now we have to tune that. And so it becomes this thing of, we've built this, we've designed this level, we've put the art in. Is it still, are people still engaging with it in the way that the design intended? Or has the art now influenced player behavior in a way that requires us to come back in and tune again? And this is the process. We will sketch out the concept with these ideas. We will then use the theme to do that. We'll then bring the encounters in, balance it, put in the art, and then we go and tune again based on the art and the audio and how that influences player behavior. And then we'll do those changes. You always have to have assumptions and goals with those changes, right? When you're playtesting, you're observing. We want people to push this thing down. We want people to throw this object into an execution point. If the player doesn't know that object is even pick upable, then they're not even going to pick it up. So that's the first design issue. If you can just observe that, you already know where there's a problem. So then you put that down as a goal. Let's put something to afford that behavior. We put it in, we retest, and we just watch again. Did they also not pick it up the second time, or did they now pick it up because we did the thing? And if they picked it up, then cool, we move on to the next one. It's a very back and forward, testing a lot, making sure our assumptions are verified or clarified by actual players, right? We're not trying to guess or shoot in the dark the whole way through. We really want to make sure that each step of the way in layers, we're putting in the right things and the things that matter. There's no point putting in 50 different abilities if, the first 5 don't work properly, right? And so we want to make sure that every layer that we put in is going to have an impact on the actual combat and the experience. And map design is like the biggest part of that, right? If we think of all the best multiplayer games like Call of Duty, or even like I'm a big Counter-Strike guy, like we all remember Aztec and all the crazy Counter-Strike maps. And so really the combat is the mechanics, the map is the place where those mechanics shine, right? When they allow the mechanics to shine. And so if you build a really, really good map design, allows the mechanics to shine in like the coolest ways. And so really that's the craft of level design. And we're trying to make sure that each mechanic we put into combat, the level design really utilizes it for all of its design and not just parts of it, right? If you can throw something, what happens if we throw it here? Let's see what happens. What happens if we do this with it? And if there's something we haven't thought about, now it's something that we might think about now. And hey, this accident happened. Should we just make that a feature? Possibly, if we think that it adds to one of the core pillars and it's fun, right? And so, yeah, a lot of iteration, a lot of layering, but I like to think of things as a skyscraper method of development where you wouldn't build the roof of a house, right, before the walls and the floor. And it's the same thing with game dev. You want to always start at the very planning stages, concepts, design documents, market research, right? And then from there, the next floor of the skyscraper. Let's build the prototype, right? And we go from there. And we're at a stage now where we're 100 floors now in this skyscraper, and it hasn't fallen down yet, and it's looking better every time. So yeah, that's basically the process in a nutshell for how we iterate on from sketch to fully playable.
So from sketch to fully playable. And I know that we just talked that there's a lot of elements that go into this, whether it be layers, objects in the game. Rough estimate, how long do you think that one map would take without everything already in there? Because once you have everything in place and then you start working on another map, you've kind of already built your foundation, right? So let's, for the sake of Dark Times, how long would you say that very first map took?
The very first map took the longest because at the very beginning, there's something we call in-world metrics. What I mean by this is if we have a house in the game and a hallway in the game in this house, what's the width of that hallway? Is it 1 meter, 1 unit? And if we imagine something like a game engine with the grids, is it one of those? Is it 2 of those? What's the player? Is it 1.5? These are numbers that you don't really know at the beginning, but it's something that every game has to figure out. We will know that Mario is 2 units high, right? And that's why we know when we need to put a platform, we're not going to put it 3 units above him because he can't jump that high, right? We will put it 1 unit above so that he can make the jump and clear it. But we don't know 1 unit, 2 units, how tall this thing should be, how wide gap should be, how far from where the player is to an execution point, like how long does that need to be? So that stuff needs to be worked out in the first map. And so a lot of that is figuring out the numbers and the actual architecture of something, the geography of something, distance, elevation, numbers. And then we can balance to those numbers when we're doing level design and mechanics design. A lot of the time, we will just play around with the numbers to get it to feel the way that we want, and then we can go from there.
I was like, that was my own curiosity. I'm just curious how long one map, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many elements.
Yeah, and that could take 3 months, that could take 2 months, but that's the general. It's hard to say because the maps, we have small maps, large maps, so it's, a small map could still take a long time if it's the first one you do. So my thing is really just that first map takes way longer than anything else because you're figuring out all those numbers.
Yeah. I kind of thought like that would be a great question at like in my line of work. I've had the luxury of like meeting like devs, asking questions, they get to I've seen like Unity and like how like things are built, and to me, I now understand why these things take so much time. And coming from community, they don't realize those things. They don't realize that there's individual layers, individual things that make up one broad image. And so I was like, what questions would community members have? They probably don't even realize this first map probably took like 2 years just to even from like just the sketch of what it wanted to look like, but actually getting the code to work, getting, this design in this first grid layer and getting this one moving in like the second grid of layer, and like how long that actually takes. And then, like you were speaking about foundation and how like once you have that foundation kind of built out, then you can start like growing and evolving and changing things. But until you have that base and it's not crumbling down, like, how long does that take? So yeah, super great question, super good answer.